Welcome to an updated Battlestar deck profile for the premium format. So this deck, it sort of tries to balance offense and defense because in the current format right now you've got Reindeer and you've got also Steam Maidens. I've sort of tried to optimize the list more to deal with the current popular decks right now. Grand Blue has noticeably fallen off a bit more, so there are some advantages it has against Grand Blue, but obviously Grand Blue has always been one of Oracle Think Tank's biggest weaknesses, and so I'm hoping that certain elements in this kind of helps in that matchup, but generally what I've got in this deck list should work against a lot of the current decks format. What we've got going on right now is that basically grade 3 heals have been introduced, which are 15k shields that you can use during an H Kishima turn. So we've just kind of gone back and forward between Silent Tom, G Guardians, Destroys OTT, and then we've gone into H Kishima to try and fix OTT. It's basically been like a sort of band-aid that they just slapped onto the clan because they introduced G-Guards to the game. And then now they just tried to nerf it again by making new heals instead that gets past the G-Guard restriction weakness or grade 0 heal restriction weakness. So just kind of gone back and forward in really weird ways. So at the moment, Oracle thinks it's kind of in a weird place. It's not as bad, I don't think, as back then. But it definitely makes it less predictable, especially when there are decks right now that are literally ticking time bombs. Because what can happen is that you could basically play for quite a while and you don't actually know what turn it is that you will actually finally put your opponent to 6. Whereas a lot of decks nowadays, they kind of have a bit more of a solid idea on when they're about to do a kill turn. We don't have that really anymore, with some variants of the clan especially. So that's kind of important. It's not as kind of consistent basically to get a turn 4 win as it used to be. So right now the idea is to try and have that tanky defense to deal with Steam Maidens who have ridiculous amount of attacks, and also to deal with Reindeer who can high roll you to Oblivion or Pearl Sister you or any of that stuff, and all that while actually be able to still put your opponent to 6 because they're playing grade 1 perfect guards. And obviously grade 1 perfect guards do work against Ichikishima obviously, so we do have to play a certain old friend of ours. So to start with, Lozenge Magus or any V series star is fine. Then we play 4 copies of Battlestar Fromage Reverse. This is kind of a decent card because the thing is that this card, it gives you quite a bit of plussing, and it also gives you 5k power for every locked unit, which is really handy. So you can actually do some kind of pressure, not amazing pressure, but it's better than most ODT grade 3s. And unlike Fromage, which people do say, oh yeah, you can just play Fromage, you don't need to play Reverse because Reverse does nothing, especially when you stride. The thing is that in the current format right now, people are riding down to grade 2 in decks like Steam Maidens and Reindeer, and so this card kind of becomes less useful, which is why this card is pretty good, because you just lose a grade 2 game, you ride up, you do something, you build hand, you basically force your opponent to guard as well. That's the idea. So you need this. You can always call this result to get your draw 2, or you can just ride it later as well. But the thing is, this card doesn't give your rear guards power for one thing, and secondly, you have to discard 1, and obviously discarding 1, that's the bit that hurts really. Obviously you can give power with the boosters, but there are ways in which you can sort of find that maybe sometimes it's just better to lock units and get the 5k's of anything. You can make nicer columns or single units or whatever because of it. So we got the 4 copies of Fromage as well. This is your rear guard to draw 2 or your other right target, particularly when you stride, because obviously this card is just give a protect gift mark when you ride it and have Balsas in its name, but that's more or less all it does in once you go into stride. But usually you should probably just play with the expectation that you're going to ride grade 3 first, which is why Reverse is underrated in the current format. And then next we play 3 copies of Silent Tom V series. So this is the this is kind of a card just brought back. So obviously grade 3 heals do work against it, which is kind of a downside, just like against every guard restrict except for Brilliant Witch Popo. But the problem with Brilliant Witch Popo is that this list doesn't actually mill hard enough. So I've settled with V Silent Tom instead. He can stop normal units from being used, which is still quite good against something like Steam Maiden and Arlim, or even like any of the Bermuda Triangle normal perfect guards as well. So that's one of the reasons to play it. when comboed with Ichikishima as well. Next we have 4 copies of Mocha, so this is a really good card. If you ride it, you're getting basically a +1 for Soul Blast 1, but also you're able to stack the top card of your deck as well. So you look at top 2, draw 1, and then return the other on the top or bottom of your deck. This is also a 90k beta, and can become a 10k shield as well. So 10k shields are really good because you want high guard quality so that you can maintain more hand and guard more efficiently. Really good. And obviously if you're using something like, well, besides early game rush, if you're going to like first trade Momo, which you can use like Fromage to draw 2 cards, and then you can just call this to make some big number with it. Also another thing is that unlike Magus, Fromage gives you instant +2, so you can actually, generally you end up finding better cards to discard, and by that I mean like weaker shields or any other card you don't really need. It's very easy to find cards you don't really need as much to use as discard fodder, whereas in Magus you're more likely to drop protect gifts or heal triggers or something good for defense to do your big play. So there is that kind of plus side as well. But obviously you can always just play Magus a bit differently and just go for the hexagonal and maybe just not bother with Facility. But then Bausis is also just very good with its beta powers because it does have quite good access to powering up as well. So yeah, Mocha's a really good card. It's also generic. Well, the ride part is generic, but the gaining extra 5k shield and power on the first part of the second skill, that's more Bowser reliant, which is probably why I don't really think I'd play in a non-Bowser deck. And then there's 4 copies of Trifle. Sentinel restricts, but honestly Sentinel restricts is a bit very iffy, not very reliable. To be honest, I use it more for the other skill, which is the fact that you can check top 3, call a card, and then stack triggers, ideally, like damage triggers or even drive triggers. And then 2 copies of Pantone. Soul Charging is useful, also giving 10k so that your Raycars can actually hit harder. Very good with cards like Trifle, obviously, because Sentinel Restrict just doesn't really do enough nowadays, especially when you have grade 3 heals existing, which can deal with Ichikishima, so having access to this can also help to push for that win. Then 4 copies of Bowser's Torijas. So this card is a 3+1. Obviously you have to have Bowser's on top of your deck, so if you see like a non-Bowser's trigger, which you're going to see a lot of non-subclan triggers in V-Series, so this is obviously a good card for that reason. Also a 13k booster as well, which is really nice, or attacker. Then 4 copies of Koga. If you ride this, you basically +1. Very good. You can lock it with reverse as well after using the skill, but also just that you can always just stack after turn 1. You can just stack like every turn with that card you just pull back from riding over. But you can also just call it on turn 1 the king if you want to do it that way. It's kind of like just there and it's handy, it's free. Also 10k shield grade 1s. There's loads of 10k shield grade 1s in this deck. 4 copies of Bowser's Marmalade. You can just play 1 Elementaria Sanctuary if you want as well. That's another option. This is just a card that can let you draw while discarding. So draw while you have small hand, but also this card can be added to your hand with Torijas as well. Then next, so we've got the over trigger because more drive triggers is great. 4 counter charge triggers because Muffin can counter charge 2, and that's always helpful. If you use Momo, you can get like counter charge 4 with it. You've got 4 Celestial Witch Toto, Stride for the crit, and then you've got 3 Weather Girl Sendor, basically GB1 crit, give 10k to Vanguard and draw, and then 4 heal triggers. Then over to G-Zone we have 4, well, you can play anything honestly, the G-Zone doesn't matter. I'm literally using the same generic G-Zone I've been slapping every video. You can just take like a few cards out, like maybe Karma Susano or something, and just play 2 Stolons if you wanted to, or maybe one of these, or maybe one of the G cards like this, for example. You can play 2 Bowser Stolons. Probably worth considering Dismal as well in the G-Zone, but honestly I don't care about this part. I just want to get through the core, the main deck core. I think that's like where more of the kind of energy needs to go into. So that's more or less it with my Battle Sister deck profile that uses the well, that adapts to the new format. I think it's a pretty decent deck. It can definitely last longer against some of the most dangerous decks in the game right now. So that's more or less it. If you want to see more of these sort of deck profiles, then just hit subscribe down below, and I think you need to also get a bell button or something. Like click onto it to actually see stuff appear in the feed, because apparently not all subscriptions appear in your feed. Something like that. Until then, I'm basically just, this is all just stuff that I'm recording before LA. So I guess I'll see you then. Goodbye.